Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. It has been our endeavor at BYJU'S to help and support IAS aspirants at every stage of their preparation. Now, when IAS Mains Examination 2021 is over and aspirants are gearing up for the last leg of this prestigious examination, that is personality test, we are back again to assist them, forming an insight and opinion about multiple issues and topics concerning our great nation and its body polity. Like last year, we have meticulously curated a special series of talk and lectures to help our young would-be steel pillars of this nation in their personality test. In this special series of talk, we invite the stalwarts of our nation, renowned academicians, personalities, intellectuals, to address the young aspirants of UPSC Civil Services examination and guide them by sharing their views on significant topics chosen carefully from various spheres of knowledge, such as Indian economy, India's foreign policy, our judicial system, environment, ecology, etc. When we started this series last year, we received overwhelming response from students in general and those appearing for their personality test in particular. This series will help you to get ready, hone your soft skills, and give finishing touches for the final stage of this examination and provide you with pragmatic insights to maximize your score. Today we are joined by a very distinguished IFS officer, Mr. Vikas Swarup. Sir is an ex-diplomat, former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, looking after relations with Europe, Central Asia, as well as the United Nations system. Mr. Swarup has served in Turkey, the United States, Ethiopia, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Japan in various Indian diplomatic missions. Sir was Indian High Commissioner to Canada as well. Sir has been the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs. Apart from being a seasoned diplomat, Sir is a prolific writer as well. Sir is author of Oscar-winning movie Slumdog Millionaire, Six Suspects, and The Accidental Apprentice. Web series on Hotstar, The Great Indian Murder, is based on Sir's book Six Suspects. Presently, Vikas Swarup Sir is host of Diplomatic Dispatch on Sunset TV. Welcome to BYJU'S IAS, sir. We are really honored and privileged to have you in our show. Sir, you are a seasoned diplomat and you are from Indian Foreign Service. Usually in interviews, UPSC interviews, they start this question like, what is the difference between diplomacy and foreign policy?
I would say foreign policy is what a country does and diplomacy is how it does it. So in other words, diplomacy is an instrument designed to achieve the objectives set out in a nation's foreign policy. To take a commonplace analogy, if foreign policy is a car, then diplomacy is the engine that drives that car.
Oh, great. Diplomacy is an engine and foreign policy is the car. Great, great. Thank you, sir. You are from Indian Foreign Service and lots of charm, glamour is associated with it. So would you like to share some those challenges and the actual glamour that you encountered and you faced?
See, behind the glitter and the glamour, there is a lot of hard work that is going on for a diplomat. Diplomacy requires skill, tact, and a very extensive knowledge base just because of the sheer range of issues that a diplomat has to deal with. For instance, a diplomat may be supervising the functioning of a chancery, meaning the embassy. He could be promoting trade and investment. He or she could be issuing passports and visas. They could be handling complex trade negotiations. So it's the totality of this experience, which a diplomat has to acquire in order to be a successful representative of the country. You have to deal with the local foreign office and other interlocutors to develop the bilateral relationship. You have to regularly send analytical reports analyzing the developments in the country in which you are posted back to headquarters. You have to interpret India for a foreign audience, and that is why the most important attribute for a diplomat is you have to be an expert in India. Before you are an expert in international relations, you have to be an expert in India, because if you do not know yourself India well, how will you talk about India to a foreign audience? And finally, you have to manage the demands and expectations of the resident Indian community. So to be a good diplomat, I would say you need to be a good communicator, you need to be a good negotiator, and above all, you need to be a good team player.
Okay, good team player. That's great. So, it is usually said that during initial days after India's independence, our foreign policy was based on ideology, starting from Bandung Conference, then non-aligned movement. Nowadays, it is said that it is more towards transactional business. Which one is better?
I would agree with you. In the first flush of our independence, India's foreign policy was based on what I would call idealist internationalism. We were seen as a leading country of what was then called the Third World, promoting the United Nations, campaigning for non-alignment and nuclear disarmament, standing up to imperialism, colonialism, and apartheid. But we also demonstrated a strand of realpolitik statecraft in our foreign policy when we conducted a peaceful nuclear explosion in 1974, and we refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And of course, we have always maintained our strategic autonomy throughout the beginning of India's foreign policy. I would say that the end of the Cold War brought greater pragmatism and realism into India's foreign policy. As we moved away from the state-led socialist economy model, we began a greater engagement with the West in general and the United States in particular. And we shifted from a worldview based on ideology to one based on pragmatic self-interest. We are still committed to the Global South, and we still remain active members of the non-aligned movement. But in practical terms, we have moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment.
Right.
In the words of our Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, the aim and objective of Indian foreign policy now is to extract as many gains from as many ties as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, we are engaging America while maintaining our traditional partnership with Russia. We are strengthening relations with Israel, but not at the cost of our ties with Iran and the Arab world. We are strengthening ties with the EU, Britain, and Japan. We are a part of Quad, but we are also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, the RIC. And most importantly, we are now actively participating in the debate on global issues such as counterterrorism, climate change, pandemics, world trade, cybersecurity, connectivity, and maritime security. And obviously, I would say this approach suits our interests in a much better way.
Means transactional is the demand of our time.
I would not use the word transaction. You know, diplomat never uses such words. I would say pragmatic. You know, something which is in a country's interest. Because at the end of the day, every country's foreign policy is designed to promote that country's fundamental self-interest.
Right, right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. What are the major challenges that an aspirant would face as an IFS officer? And how best these challenges can be handled?
Well, obviously, the first challenge is to adjust to living for long periods abroad, away from your friends and family. You have to deal with culture shock every 3 years when you move and adapt to a new country and have to overcome barriers of language, of climate, of custom, and of cuisine. The children have to adjust to a totally new curriculum when they shift from one country to another. Here, when you shift from, let's say, Uttar Pradesh to Karnataka, you have to deal with a new curriculum. There, they are shifting from one country to an entirely different educational setup. You could find yourself in a war-torn country or one where there is a civil war happening and even basic foodstuffs may not be available at times. Security could also be an issue in certain countries. And even in advanced countries, nowadays, terrorism has become an all-pervasive threat, and diplomats are always seen as soft targets. You have to also learn to live in a fishbowl where your behavior and your actions are being constantly observed and sometimes even monitored. But the rewards are also excellent, because nothing can beat the sheer thrill of representing your country abroad. So the best way to handle these challenges is to embrace them, to embrace change, be open-minded, be collaborative, be creative, and above all, be cool under pressure.
Great. So, sir, when you joined the service and when you went for the first posting, did it scare you or?
No, it did not scare me, because I was keen to explore new cultures, I was keen to explore new countries. That is why I joined the Foreign Service, the sheer thrill of representing India abroad. And you know, the difference between a tourist and a diplomat is what? A tourist goes to a country and he goes there for maybe what? 3 days, 1 week, maximum 1 month. And you come back with some surface impressions of that country.
Right.
But when you are posted to a country as a diplomat, you live there for 3 to 4 years. And then you really understand the DNA of that country, what makes that country tick. And you understand in a much more deeper way the fundamental culture, the ethos of that country. You immerse yourself in that culture. So you come away with a much deeper understanding than you would as a tourist. And I think that is one of the charms of the Indian Foreign Service, that every 3 years you get posted to a new country, you get exposed to a new culture. And if you embrace that culture, then I think it can be very rewarding.
Great. Thank you, sir. Sir, nowadays we have seen lots of ups and downs in India-China relationship. Lots of aggressive stance China took. We also had to retaliate. Is China a threat?
Well, certainly the myth of the peaceful rise of China has been busted. China is increasingly repressive at home and assertive abroad. We have already seen Chinese expansionism in Southeast Asia, where it uses its so-called 9-dash line to claim about 90% of the South China Sea. We have seen its repeated threats against Taiwan, which it regards as a renegade province. We have seen how it has crushed democratic dissent in Hong Kong. And of course, how it is engaging in a debt trap diplomacy through its Belt and Road Initiative. At the same time, because its $18 trillion economy is now the second largest in the world, it can dictate terms to others. And it has weaponized everything, from trade to tourism to even education. We have an even bigger problem, because China is an immediate neighbor and we share a 3,488 kilometer long border with China. For 30 years, we had an agreement with China to maintain peace and tranquility on what is called the line of actual control. But now, China wants to unilaterally alter the status quo, leading to the deadly clashes between Indian and Chinese troops in Galwan in June 2020, and a military standoff since then. And China, as you have seen, is also increasing its economic and strategic footprint in our immediate neighborhood in a bid to encircle India. So China has become a threat, and India-China relations are currently in their most difficult phase in the last 30 years. Unfortunately, I do not see any signs of an immediate improvement. We will just have to live with the reality of an adversarial China and of a militarized border till such time as China sees reason and de-escalates.
Sir, now coming back to India's immediate neighborhood, are we handling Nepal in the right way? Or Nepal went out of our control or out of our this friendly list?
Certainly there are tensions in our special relationship with Nepal. As you know, we have deep cultural, religious and economic bonds with Nepal. We have an open border with Nepal. 8 million Nepalese live and work in India. Now look, there has always been a strand of anti-India sentiment in Nepal. But it has been exacerbated since 2015, when India was seen to be backing an economic blockade over Nepal's promulgation of its new constitution. More recently, Nepal laid claim to Kalapani, Limpiadhura and Lipu Lake, which all fall within Indian territory, and even published a new official map to formalize this claim. Kathmandu, as you have said, is also charting a closer economic and political relationship with China, whose influence and interest in Nepal has grown steadily in the last decade. We have to acknowledge that Nepal has always been adept at playing the balancing game between India and China. And this is not a recent phenomenon. It was even practiced by the erstwhile Nepalese monarchs, and even by Nepalese politicians who were seen as close to India. So what can India do? I would say we should build greater interdependence and interlinkages through stepping up of our delivery on our development assistance and in execution of projects for greater connectivity in all forms, so that Nepal continues to see the utility and the value of enhanced engagement with India. We have already extended considerable assistance to Nepal in the fields of education, health and infrastructure, capacity building for their officials, new road and rail links, and of course, hydel projects which have massive potential of power exports to India, as we have done with Bhutan. In return, we expect Nepal to respect our geostrategic and our security interests.
Sir, when we look at Bangladesh, which is our also an immediate neighborhood, how come Bangladesh surpassed India on major socio-economic indices?
The rise of Bangladesh has been one of the biggest success stories in recent times. Just 15 years ago, in 2007, the per capita income of Bangladesh was half that of India. But in 2020, it surpassed India. Now, this has happened through incremental improvements in social and economic indicators over time and a structural transformation of the Bangladesh economy, which has seen the share of agriculture in Bangladesh's GDP decline to less than 15%, that of industry to rise to 33%, and that of services to cross 50%. Successive governments have also invested very heavily in women's empowerment, by providing them skills-based education and training, access to microcredit, and the job market. And these efforts have resulted in the increase of female workforce in the domestic market from 26% in 2003 to about 37% today. In fact, of the 4 million workers employed by Bangladesh in the garment sector, most of them are women. Exports have risen sharply from less than $2 billion in 1992 to over $40 billion in 2019. Remittances from more than 10 million Bangladeshi workers working abroad have also multiplied from less than $1 billion in 1992 to more than $22 billion last year. This has allowed the government of Sheikh Hasina the fiscal headroom to expand the social security net and to execute mega infrastructure projects. Of course, she has also followed a policy of sustained macroeconomic stability and prudent international debt management. Since 2009, she has also provided political stability and protect Bangladesh's social fabric. So I would say these are some of the reasons which account for the strong socio-economic performance of Bangladesh.
Bangladesh worked on all fronts.
Yes, it was not exactly. And it is not a recent phenomenon. It has been going on for quite some time. I mean, you do not just surpass another country's GDP overnight.
Right.
It has to be,
a continuous process.
It is a continuous process.
Right.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir. Sir, now American troops are out of Afghanistan. And we see that Taliban recapturing Afghanistan, it is going to affect our security scenario as well. Pakistan is already hostile to India. The entire peace process, as an IAS aspirant, where is India? Is India being left out of Afghanistan peace process? What should be India's stand, sir?
Well, first of all, there is no peace process currently underway in Afghanistan because the Taliban have shown no interest in political reconciliation or accommodating the aspirations of women and minorities. At the same time, it cannot be denied that India is one of the losers in the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. The big winner is Pakistan, which has always treated Afghanistan as a buffer state, providing it strategic depth against India. And the other winners, I would say, are China, Russia, and Iran, all of which wanted to see the exit of US troops from their backyard. But we have established links with the Taliban, and eventually they will need us because we have helped create durable infrastructure in Afghanistan. We have built roads, electricity lines, dams, schools, hospitals. We invested more than $3 billion in Afghanistan. And the Taliban recognize that they will need India's help for economic reconstruction and for training of their people. We are also trying to create political space for ourselves in Afghanistan by involving friendly regional stakeholders. Last year, as you know, in November, we hosted a Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan at the level of national security advisors to evolve a common strategy to deal with the new political dispensation in Afghanistan, to protect our vital security interests, and to ensure that Afghanistan does not become a breeding ground for international terrorism once again.
Right. So India is proactively trying to
Yes.
handle it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, because Afghanistan, what happens in Afghanistan has a direct impact on our security.
Right.
And that is why we have to be proactive in terms of dealing with the new political reality in Afghanistan.
Sir, we are into Biden administration in America. How do you assess India's relationship vis-a-vis United States of America? Or what should be India's stand there? Or what are the possible challenges that you foresee coming in way of India-America relationship?
When President Biden came to power, many experts felt that he would not be as interested in India as his predecessor, President Trump, was. But President Biden has proved them wrong. He has shown that under him also, India-US relations will be a priority. He has also kept the focus on the Indo-Pacific and on strengthening the Quad. I think the growing convergence between the views of New Delhi and Washington concerning the threat from China will continue to facilitate a stronger security partnership. Biden may be more vocal on issues like human rights and treatment of minorities, but he needs a democratic India to counter an authoritarian China as much as Trump did. The US also sees India as an important partner in health, digital, and climate cooperation, and of course, as a major market for its defense and consumer goods. Finally, the growing profile and resources of the Indian diaspora in the United States necessitates a closer partnership between the world's largest democracies. So I think the fundamental trajectory of India-US relations will not change under President Biden. In fact, it can only go up.
So there will not be any fundamental change.
There cannot be, because I think there is a bipartisan consensus in the United States on the importance of India and on the need for a stronger India-US partnership.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, post-COVID, world has changed. What kind of world order is evolving? After the collapse of USSR, we saw unipolar world, everything centered around America. Post-COVID, we are seeing different type of world coming out. So, what kind of world you are seeing as evolving post-COVID, and what should be what would be India's challenges, and how to handle it?
The COVID-19 pandemic is easily the most disruptive global event since the Second World War.
Right.
But it is not going to transform the essential nature of world politics. The balance of power will remain pretty much as it was prior to the pandemic. The US and China will continue to remain the biggest economies. But COVID-19 will accelerate the transition to a more fragmented world order in which multiple poles will cooperate and compete. It will also reinforce some disturbing trends which were underway even before the first case of coronavirus was detected. So, it will accelerate a retreat from globalization, reinforce xenophobia and racism, raise new barriers to international trade and investment and travel, and give both democratic and non-democratic governments greater license to exercise greater control over the lives of their citizens. On the positive side, the pandemic has accelerated the pace of digital transformation and underscored the need for resilient health infrastructure.
Right.
And I think this is where India can benefit. Given our strengths in digital, in services, and in vaccine production, I think India can become a major provider of goods in the post-COVID economy. Another area where India can benefit from is the reshoring of global supply chains post-pandemic. No one wants to put all their eggs in the China basket any longer.
Right.
And India offers a safe and stable destination and could emerge as an important hub for global manufacturing, given its demographic advantage, skilled workforce, technical know-how, and strong research and development capacity. So we just have to position ourselves to become an integral part of the new trusted value chains.
Right. You were the Indian High Commissioner to Canada. Canada is sometimes called mini Punjab. So how to attract? This is something which I want to know. And as a student of fundamental civil services examination, what India should do to attract those Indians living abroad, influential people, or what steps have we taken, sir?
So basically you are asking me a question on what India should do,
yes, sir,
to deepen its engagement with the Indian diaspora.
Right, sir.
Now, the Indian diaspora, first of all, you must understand, is now 31 million strong. This includes both NRIs, non-resident Indians, and PIOs, that is, persons of Indian origin. And the reason why we are deepening our engagement with the diaspora is very simple. We recognize that a successful, prosperous, and politically influential diaspora is a strategic asset for India. It is also a very important source of remittances. I told you how much remittances Bangladesh got,
Right.
but you know how much remittances India got from its diaspora? Last year, it was $87 billion, the highest in the world. The diaspora also helps in accelerating technological development, transferring knowledge, and fostering innovation. And that is why the government has launched a number of programs to engage the diaspora. So we have the OCI card, the Overseas Citizenship of India card, which offers lifelong visa-free entry and confers almost the same rights on members of the diaspora as are available to resident Indians. We also have a number of programs like the Vajra faculty scheme, the Pravasi Bharati Academic and Scientific Sampark or Prabhas scheme, the Global Initiative of Academic Networks or GYAN scheme to tap the academic and scientific talents of the diaspora community. In 2020, the Global Pravasi Rishta portal was launched as a single point platform for sharing information linking Indian missions with the diaspora. All our embassies and consulates have at their disposal an Indian Community Welfare Fund, which is a fund which is meant to assist any Indian citizen in distress abroad. There is also a Know India program which allows the diaspora youth to travel to India to get better acquainted with Indian culture and with the strides in science and technology. There are scholarship schemes for diaspora children who wish to study in India. So the broad idea is to enable the diaspora to connect closely with India and to better leverage their skills and resources for the domestic transformation of India.
Right.
And I think we are succeeding in this. The diaspora is increasingly interested in developments in India and they want to contribute to the development of India.
Right. Thank you, sir. Sir, Pakistan is passing through a phase of transition. It is under debt trap, under Belt and Road Initiative. Its political environment is fragile. So, how do you see what is in India's interest? Unstable Pakistan is good for India or not good for India?
I think the conventional wisdom has always been that an unstable Pakistan is not in India's interest because it will lead to a lot of problems.
Right.
One, it will allow the homegrown terrorists in Pakistan much easier access to enter into India. It could provoke the deep state in Pakistan to launch another misadventure in Kashmir or elsewhere. It could lead to a refugee crisis on our borders if people feel that there are no economic prospects in Pakistan any longer. And most dangerously, it could raise the specter of loose nukes.
Right.
You know, so I think we want a stable Pakistan at peace with itself and with its neighbors.
So, unstable Pakistan is not in our interest.
In the long term,
Long term,
is
right.
not in your interest because see what happened when Afghanistan was completely disturbed. Look at the kind of negative
Right,
impacts
sir.
that
Right,
happened:
right,
the drug
sir.
trade, the gun trade, the refugee crisis. You know, all that things, all those things happen.
Will happen again here in
Yes,
Pakistan
exactly.
also. Thank you, sir. So, again coming back to COVID, origins of COVID or coronavirus is not yet known. Especially during COVID alpha variant, WHO was severely criticized. Even American government pulled out of WHO. To what extent those criticisms are valid and how to reform the entire setup of World Health Organization?
Well, the WHO certainly did not cover itself in glory with the manner in which it handled the pandemic. First of all, it took too long to act on the virus. The WHO waited until the 30th of January 2020 to declare a public health emergency of international concern. And COVID-19 was not declared an international pandemic till the 11th of March. The WHO's emergency committee did not immediately recommend travel restrictions. As a result, the COVID-19 virus spread for months under the radar, thereby preventing effective containment and paving the way for a disastrous pandemic, which is now sweeping the world. Many experts have alleged that the delay on the part of WHO was to cover up China's failure to handle the virus, which, as you know, began in Wuhan. Throughout the pandemic, the WHO also provided inconsistent scientific information, data, and operational guidance, which could inform global efforts to control the virus. And it did not develop an effective vaccine strategy. Working with the COVAX facility, it failed to garner the resources necessary to guarantee vaccine access to the developing world. So yes, I would say the criticism is justified, but we must also acknowledge that the WHO is the only UN agency, the only global intergovernmental organization with a mandate, specific mandate in the field of public health. It is the only institution that can provide global health leadership at a time of a pandemic. So we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The key task, as you said, is to reform the WHO, make it more accountable, make it more empowered, and ensure that it has a robust early warning system so that future epidemics do not become pandemics.
Right. So we have to reform it rather than abandoning it. Right.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir. During 60s and 70s, early 80s also, we saw a huge wave of globalization. There were Keynesian economics and people were saying open the border and you can say get more and more integrated with the global trade. But after some time in early 2000, we saw just a reversal of that. With Brexit, we see Trump era, and then again MAGA, Make America Great Again. Is India also moving towards protectionism and inward-looking economic diplomacy?
Well, the short answer is yes. Former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian has said that since 2014, there have been 3,200 tariff increases in India, which have pushed up the average tariff rate from 13% to 18%, affecting 70% of India's imports. Now, the government believes that by erecting these tariff barriers, foreign companies which wish to sell their products in India's large market will be compelled to manufacture locally. But others say that this is not going to happen and that it will put off manufacturers who wish to relocate from China but do not want to enter a market which already has high tariffs. Also, by not joining the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement and showing reluctance to enter into free trade agreements with other countries, India will find it increasingly difficult to participate in global value chains. Currently, India accounts for just 1.3% of the world's GVC exports compared to 18% for China. So we have to shed the protectionist mindset and allow competition, which will help modernize industry and remove structural obstacles to growth, such as low productivity and logistics bottlenecks.
So India should not go for protectionism.
India should not only go for protectionism.
Okay. Yes.
I would say that, go for it in moderation, not in such an extreme way that the tariff barriers become so high that it discourages foreign companies from setting base in India. Because I think this is a big opportunity for India. As I mentioned earlier, people have now been disillusioned with China.
Right.
And they do not want to put all their eggs in the China basket. They want to relocate out of China. And then they are looking for, which is the best market where they can relocate to.
Right. So.
And obviously India is competing with the tiger economies of Southeast Asia as well. There is Thailand, there is Malaysia, there is Philippines, there is Indonesia. So if they offer a better, economic
Tariffs,
environment,
yes.
if they offer lower tariffs, if they offer incentives, then they would gravitate towards those countries.
Right. India will lose that.
Then India can potentially lose out on that.
So the protectionism with caution.
Protectionism with caution and protectionism in moderation.
Moderation, right, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, we saw our traditional relationship with Russia, USSR. Then we shifted more towards America after the disintegration of USSR. Then in between we see a policy of look east policy, look west policy, extended neighborhood policy. Do we need a strategic shift in our foreign policy?
I think you have already said that shift is happening with all these new partnerships that we are establishing. I think India is striving to become an important pole of the emerging multipolar world. You can see this in the deepening of bilateral engagements with all the major powers, in the expanding footprint of India in areas such as the Gulf, Central Asia, the Pacific Islands, and Africa. There is greater willingness to shoulder greater responsibility, whether in the area of climate change, maritime security, international peacekeeping, or humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. We are also enlarging our soft power through initiatives such as the International Day of Yoga. So as Foreign Minister Jaishankar has said, India now aspires to be a leading power rather than just a balancing power. But for this to happen, it is critical that we sustain a GDP growth of 8 to 10% per annum. Because only an economically strong and a socially inclusive India will command the respect and attention of the world.
Socially inclusive and economically developed, strong.
Exactly.
That's great. Sir, now we are coming to Quad. Will India benefit? India is part of Quad. Will it benefit India?
The pace at which the Quad has evolved over the last 4 years is quite extraordinary. From a loose grouping of like-minded democracies which came together to provide humanitarian assistance after the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, to a full-fledged geostrategic forum which campaigns for a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific and seeks to offer solutions to the world in the domains of cybersecurity, public health, climate change, and technology. And the resurrection of the Quad is a direct consequence of China's belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region. From trying to bully countries in the South and East China Seas to the military provocation to India in eastern Ladakh. India will definitely benefit from being in the Quad because it believes in a multipolar Asia where no regional hegemon can be allowed to write the rules or dictate the rules. And the Quad promotes the idea of multipolarity and keeping the global commons open and free. Besides, India is the only country amongst the Quad that is locked in a military standoff with China at the line of actual control. India will also benefit from the vaccine diplomacy initiative of the Quad, being the primary partner to deliver 1 billion doses this year, as has been agreed among the Quad countries. This is also an opportunity for India to get embedded in the trusted supply chains which are being diversified out of China. But the real value of India's membership of the Quad is the strategic perception that it generates. Just think, 4 of the world's leading democracies coming together. Now China sees India not through the lens just of India, but through the lens of the Quad. And that is why it is rattled by it.
So India will benefit and it will also counterbalance China as well. Thank you, sir. Sir, the current ongoing tension between Russia and NATO forces, led America, will affect the whole world, particularly the energy scenario. And after the COVID pandemic, when energy demands are increasing, so it will put India also in some kind of risk. How India can secure energy security and how India can protect its interest?
Well, right now what we are witnessing is an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation with each side betting that the other one will blink first. But a military conflict between NATO and Russia will be disastrous for the entire world. And this would mean that it would be forced to align even more closely with China. For the West, it would mean having to expend energy on 2 adversaries at the same time. You are already focusing on China, now you have to focus on Russia as well. A military confrontation in Ukraine will also depress the global economy just when it is trying to come out of the shadow of the pandemic and drive up energy prices. I mean, Brent crude has already touched $100 a barrel. For India, this will obviously have very severe economic consequences, but politically also, India will have to balance its long-standing strategic partnership with Russia with its strong ties with the US and the West. And let's not forget, we have 20,000 Indians in Ukraine as well, including 18,000 students. So India has a huge stake in ensuring that the diplomatic standoff ends quickly and both sides reach some kind of modus vivendi, by which I would say that Russia's legitimate security interests need to be protected, but at the same time, Ukraine's sovereignty also needs to be respected.
Right. So India has to protect lots of interest, not just energy interest.
Correct.
Lots of Indians are there.
Correct.
And again, there.
No, as I said, at stake is India's relationship with Russia and with the West.
Right.
And we have been doing a balancing act. And balancing acts are always tough. So we have to ensure, we have to prevail on both sides to cool down the tensions, step back from the brink, and allow diplomacy a chance to succeed.
Sir, now lots of students, they are preferring IFS as their first choice. And obviously, lots of contentious questions are asked. A student not having any formal training of foreign policy or diplomacy, he or she has just studied in graduation or post-graduation. How to handle such contentious issues when a student is not clear about the answer?
See, the government is looking for well-rounded individuals with an aptitude for hard work, a desire to solve problems, and an awareness of what's happening in India and the world. So when you are faced with a contentious issue, it is important that you look at it from all sides. Now, international relations in particular are not black or white, as we have seen with the Russia-Ukraine question as well. There are valid points, valid demands on both sides. So you have to look at it dispassionately from both sides. You must show an analytical grasp of the subject. Now, as you asked me, what happens if you don't know about that subject? If you have not read enough about that subject, then what do you do? Well, I would say no point bluffing and getting caught. So if you do not know enough about the subject, then say so. At the end of the day, remember, this is a test of your personality, not of your memory.
Right, right. So if you don't know, simply say
so, but you should, I mean, if a student goes to the interview board and says, I do not know what is happening on the Russia-Ukraine border, then obviously that student, certainly is not fit to join the foreign service, because he or she is completely unaware of the current geopolitical realities and the current situation.
Basic things he or she should know.
Exactly.
But obviously the nuances he or she may not know.
I agree. So there, as I said, it is okay for you to say that I'm sorry, I do not know that detail. I know this part, but I do not know that part.
Sir.
But rather than saying, yes, I know that part, and then getting caught, because the people who are interviewing you will be experts in that subject.
That's right, sir. So now there is something related to your own job. You were official spokesperson of Ministry of External Affairs. How difficult is the task, sir? And you were the spokesperson of such a large, vast, diverse country. What are the challenges did you face and how difficult it is?
Look, I served as spokesman for 2 full years, and I know how tough that job is. It was like having an exam every Thursday when I used to have my weekly press conference, and I would face 50 reporters sitting in front of me who could ask me any question under the sun. So to be a good spokesman, you have to prepare well, you have to read up on everything and anticipate the questions that are likely to come. And if indeed some questions come out of syllabus, as they very often do, then you have to rely on your knowledge base, on your training as a diplomat, and come up with the answer at the right time.
Great. So means you have to do lots of homework.
You have to do a lot of homework, and you have to think on your feet as well, because you cannot anticipate every question. It is impossible.
Right.
You can anticipate what is happening now, but supposing somebody asks you something about which happened 3 months ago, then you have to have the memory to remember what happened 3 months ago, and then you have to frame your response, what has changed within those 3 months. So you have to continuously update your knowledge database. That is the most important thing.
So you have to study a lot.
Yes, you have to study a lot, and you have to give an exam every week.
Means even after clearing this examination,
Yes,
you have to
do.
Right, sir. Sir, now we have a new trend or new strand in diplomacy, that is economic diplomacy. As you rightly said, China has weaponized everything. So every country tries to leverage on its strengths. What are the new trends of this economic diplomacy and how India is practicing it?
Economic diplomacy is the use of economic and strategic tools to further a country's diplomatic agenda. Now, India's traditional economic diplomacy focused on South-South cooperation and capacity building for fellow developing countries through the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, which was launched way back in 1964. From the 2000s, our development assistance began to include concessional lines of credit, or LOCs, and currently we have 306 LOCs worth $30.59 billion, which have been extended to 65 countries. These LOCs have become catalysts for some of India's leading companies to execute projects and enter new markets in countries across Asia and Africa. Now, economic diplomacy in the 21st century is increasingly being used by diplomats to project brand India. This can involve packaging and promoting government schemes and incentives to attract foreign businesses, investments, technology, and even tourists.
Right.
It also means focusing on WTO issues, pursuing market access and contesting non-tariff barriers, negotiating free trade and preferential trade agreements, and bilateral accords on matters such as investments, social security, avoidance of double taxation, financial services, etc. Ensuring energy security and food security have also become key tasks of economic diplomacy. So Indian diplomats also pursue oil concessions, critical minerals, and new varieties of high-yielding crops. The Arctic is an emerging area of interest, and diplomats are grappling with the implication of the opening of the Northern Sea route which passes right through the middle of the Arctic. Other hot issues on the international agenda include climate change, data privacy and protection, terrorist funding and cybersecurity. India's initiative to establish the International Solar Alliance to help developing countries develop their solar energy projects, and our vaccine diplomacy to provide vaccines and essential medicines to a large number of partner countries, I would say are two very successful examples of economic diplomacy. I think some of the newer areas of economic diplomacy will be global health, resilient infrastructure, 5G, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the fourth industrial revolution. And I'm sure Indian diplomats will equip themselves to handle the complex negotiations which are going to take place to frame the rules for these emerging areas. Because the ultimate task of economic diplomacy is to be a rule maker rather than a rule taker. That is the ultimate task of economic diplomacy.
So be the rule maker.
Be the rule maker.
And not the rule taker.
And not the rule taker.
Great. Sir, lots of students are watching this conversation with you, and students, they aspire to be like you. What is your message for those who will appear in their personality test and those who are thinking of taking this exam? Overall, what would be your message to our students?
Well, I would say that a career in the government service can be very satisfying, can be very fulfilling and rewarding if you have the aptitude for it and if you are ready for the challenge, because it's not going to be a bed of roses. The exam itself is a very tough exam. It's one of the toughest examinations in the world in terms of the number of people who appear and the number of people who finally make it. So you have to do hard work. There is no substitute to hard work. You have to be devoted, you have to be dedicated, you have to keep studying, keep enlarging your knowledge base. And remember, there is no shortcut to success. There is no kunji that you can acquire which will allow you to succeed immediately. So I would say that if you have the aptitude, if you have the determination and the dedication to succeed, then you will succeed. Just remember, do not give up. And keep your interest high, keep your enthusiasm high. Do not get disheartened if you do not achieve success in the first go. There are multiple attempts provided, and you must keep evaluating yourself that how much you have achieved, what remains to be done. And if you make it, then I'm sure you will find that you made the right choice.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. And hopefully this series and this conversation will help our students to prepare your questions from India's foreign policy, international relations, emerging challenges of India's foreign policy, how to handle contentious issues on foreign policy. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jha. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, sir.